Hi, it's Alexander Russo with The Grade, and this is the Education Show. And I'm so delighted to be here with Jessica Grose from the New York Times. Jessica, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're here to talk about your recent New York Times opinion section story about a school in Beaufort, Georgia. Am I saying that correctly?
I think so, yeah.
What did you go to find, and what did you find?
So, an editor here on the opinion desk had heard about a high school called Seconder, and it touts itself as America's first AI centered high school. So this is a brand new school. It was carved out of a bigger district in 2022, and it just graduated its first class that had been there all 4 years. And so when I heard about this AI centered high school, my first question was, what does that even mean? And they sent me a bunch of documentation and, framework for curricula. And to be honest, it sounded like a lot of jargon. So I wanted to go down there and see what it actually looked like in practice. And it's not just the high school. There are two elementary schools and a middle school that feed into the high school, and they are all using this AI first framework to run their schools.
And what was your takeaway? What's your take on AI in school?
Okay, well, those are two different things. So what I saw there were really great schools that I would be happy to send my children to. They are diverse. They seemed really well run. The kids seemed happy. They seemed vibrant. They had a lot to offer. And there did not seem to be as much AI as I was maybe led to believe by their glossy marketing brochures. So, there were a lot of activities they showed me when I was there, including eighth graders interacting with chatbots and, first graders being taught the term user experience. But when I was outside, the very managed experience of moving through the schools with all of the administration trailing me, I talked to a bunch of recent graduates of Seconder High School. And I also talked to parents whose kids go to all three schools right now. And what everyone said to a person was, there is some AI. They do focus on the ethical use of AI, and what that means. We can sort of get into that later. But in the day-to-day, there isn't actually that much AI. It is not that deeply in the humanities. It is where you would expect it. You would see it in computer science classes. You would see it more in engineering classes where there were more appropriate use cases, especially in the high school. My feeling about AI and its use in K through 12 is that I think it has basically no place in elementary school. I don't think it should be anywhere in elementary school. Maybe you can talk about its existence in elementary school and how to possibly think critically about images that you may see that are not real. And deep fakes and all of that. You can start learning that maybe later in elementary school. The technology itself should not be in elementary school. I think in middle school, maybe limited to a tech class. But maybe only in later middle school. I don't really think that there's any reason for middle school kids to use it. I think in high school, it should be used with serious guardrails. There should be a really well-defined use case for why you are using it, why it is the best method of getting the information or research or outcome that you want, and that there should be really clear guidelines at the school district level about appropriate use. And it should be really clear to teachers, students, parents, what is appropriate use. Are kids still going to cheat using AI? Absolutely. The horse is out of the barn on that. But I think it's just, if you wanted a shorthand, very intentional usage, basically only in high school.
What's your take? I think I can guess the answer, but what's your sense of the backlash or the freak out or whatever you would choose to call it? There's a lot of concern about AI in schools and tech in schools in general. Do you come out worried from your reporting and your own experiences? Do you come out worried? Do you come out concerned? Do you come out actually reassured?
From Seconder, I came out reassured because I felt like Well, I felt reassured, but also irritated. So reassured because I thought that even though this district claimed to be going all in on AI and, really centering their pedagogy around thinking about AI, uh, all of the things that I think are good about good schools, caring teachers, responsive teachers, invested families, kids with a lot of options to, take different kinds of classes, a diverse community. I mean, the school is like the most diverse school I've ever reported on. It's about a quarter white, a quarter Black, a quarter Hispanic, a quarter Asian. I think that is very unusual for anywhere in the country. And that was the number one thing that people mentioned that they liked about the school. So all of those things have nothing to do with AI. I think a lot about the mother I spoke to who said, I love the school because, one of my children has an IEP and I was worried that it wasn't being met. And I called the coordinator and she assured me that she was going to take care of it and it got handled in 5 minutes. And I trusted her, right? That ain't AI. That is human interaction and trust built over many years between parents and administration and teachers. And so that sort of thing, even when you have this sort of a lot of these claims about using AI and being a school of the future and being future ready, they're still doing all those nuts and bolts of what a good school is. And so then I sort of have the question, which I still is an open question that I don't think I answered in the piece because I don't think that there is an answer that at least anyone would admit to. So what is the motivation of marketing yourself as an AI first school? What does that even mean? And I don't know that I got a straight answer about what that even means. And I think it's a number of things. I think public schools are understandably feeling under a lot of pressure, a lot of criticism from families, a lot of competition from charter schools, from private schools, from home schools. And so they need to differentiate themselves in some way. Another question is about financial incentives. So, I know that Seconder got a grant from google.org. I don't know what other sort of financial incentives might be for districts to adopt this technology, or at least say they're adopting this technology. I don't know whether they're getting, great deals on Gemini or the availability of these things. I really worry so much about the tech companies more than I worry about the schools and the perverse and pretty much terrible incentives created by the tech companies. So I really don't blame public schools kind of ever for doing what they kind of perceive that they need to do to stay relevant. In terms of the tech backlash that parents are feeling, my kids were 3 and 7 in 2020. And having every child have to learn virtually was a disaster. And I just don't think that anyone can look at what happened in 2020 and 2021 and be like, that was great. Let's have more of that. And so I think that really set the stage for a much deeper skepticism towards the ubiquity of screens in schools. And I think we're anyone who's paying attention not just to their own kids, but to the trends in test scores, attention spans, all of that, has every right to be worried, not just about, is my kid going to have a decent future with AI maybe taking a quarter of all, entry-level jobs, but what's it doing to their brains and their relationships? I think just living through the events of the past decade as a parent, I think you'd really have to be pretty out to lunch to not be concerned about the presence of screens in your children's lives. And, I think there's a range of attitudes about what to do about that and how to react to that. And then there's social media. Like there's just so many sort of different aspects of this. And AI is just the newest one to contend with.
Right.
But I think the AI backlash is more profound than previous backlashes because it has happened so fast. And I think most parents feel like it has happened completely without their consent or understanding. So you recently saw there was an AI high school planned for New York City, and it got delayed or possibly canceled
Right.
because of parent protests. And I
Right.
think you're just going to see more of that happening because people are just, they're skeptical. They're understandably skeptical because we were all told, oh, everybody needs a laptop. They're going to fall behind if they don't all get a laptop. And I don't think that you can say that that was an effort that was really successful. And
Speaking
so
of,
now we're sort of getting the same message again. And I think people are appropriately looking a little sideways at that.
one of the things that's happened that also happened during the pandemic and the school closings and the remote instruction was that the concerns of parents, or the concerns about ed tech and AI, are being dismissed as hysteria, or being dismissed as sort of a bourgeois concern of a certain subclass of parents. What do you think about that response?
I just think that that's not true. I mean, every time I write about this topic, I get a broader, more politically diverse, economically diverse, religiously diverse group of people who are upset about screens in schools. I do not think that this is just an upper middle class, bourgeois, whatever, because people understand the Pandora's box of the internet. And yes, they want their kids to be prepared for the future. I think everybody wants that. Everyone wants their kids to be able to get jobs after they graduate from school. And I think everybody, I don't think that that is the province of only, working class people or upper class people. I think that this is a pretty wide concern. I mean, you see the backlash towards AI data centers. That is certainly not among the elite. So I think to dismiss it as just like, oh, this is, rich people having a luxury of pushing back against this is kind of demonstrably false at this point.
Tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, about your work and your position at the Times. I'm fascinated by reported opinion. I appreciate it, appreciate your work and many others, but it's confusing to many of the public where reported opinion sits in. This piece, from the way it reads at least, other than a couple of sections where you make personal references, looks like a Times feature to me. What's the difference? How do you explain it? And what's it like being in this intermediary place?
I don't think it is intermediary. I mean, I worked in the newsroom before I came to opinion, and I think the ethos and approach is completely different. I have a lot of opinions, and I'm not quiet about them. So I think with the approach when you're writing a piece of reported opinion is, right, I don't have to go to the makers of AI ed tech I don't have to go to the people who make ed tech products with AI and give them a fair shake and say, like, tell me, what your aims are. And I don't have to have that sort of both sides have been given an equal say. I certainly consider the other side and I air those arguments in order to dismantle them, because I think if you're not considering the other side's arguments, your argument is going to be weak. But I think it is also about tone. So, I think most of the newsroom articles are less voicey. And so it is both an ability to have a very strong point of view and opinion on a topic and a skeptical view of a topic going in rather than a neutral view of a topic. which is not to say that my colleagues in the newsroom aren't skeptical of everything they're hearing. That's like the baseline expectation of the job.
Right.
But, I would, admittedly, and in the piece, and if you've seen my previous writings about AI, I don't think that the newsroom would ever let me report on AI because I have a pretty clear skepticism towards the technology in general, especially when it comes to education. So I don't think that I am coming to the topic with no bias. There is a bias. And I think if you have reading comprehension, you can tell what that is. But
Right.
that doesn't mean that I go into this as an honest broker and saying like, okay, I want to take you at your word. I would take this really seriously. I don't think that you have bad intentions, the people behind this school, even though I wouldn't choose to sort of orient a school around AI. I thought these administrators were really very caring, and they thought that they were doing the right thing. And so I wanted to understand why they felt that way and what the motivations were behind creating this school and how it came to be. So yeah, I would say those are the real differences. We all, in opinion, I don't think opinions are very good if they are not supported by facts. So, I would say the two biggest things are you're allowed to show that you do have a bias, and that you can be voicier, and you do not have to speak from the sort of, 10,000 foot neutral point of view. And I think, where it gets a little trickier probably for readers is like the magazine, the voices, magazine, the Times Magazine is a place where you can do some voiceover writing, and there's
Right.
certain places in the newsroom where you can be a little bit voicier, but, as a sort of general way to distinguish the different kinds of work that gets done.
No, I'm very glad that it's there. What you do, appreciate the differences, and just appreciate also the quantity. It just means that there are more people looking at the situation. I only care about education journalism, so the more people, the merrier, as long as there's a commitment to the facts, which is obviously
Yes.
not a problem here. You are not solely an education journalist by any means. You write about a ton of different things. I'm going to call you an honorary education journalist, if that's
I'll take
okay.
it.
Who else is out there that you read, admire, on ed tech and AI in schools or in schools in general? I always like to ask people their favorites.
Well, I mean, my colleagues, Natasha Singer and Dana Goldstein, I just think do such a phenomenal job. I read everything that they write always. So, definitely want to shout them out. I always read Matt Barnum's newsletter. I think he does a really excellent job sort of talking about the issues, and he gets great interviews. I read Tim Daly. I think he is a straight shooter and with a lot of, good ideas about how to change things. I read actually a lot of Reddit because that's where teachers are.
Yeah.
I really want to know what, and obviously that's anonymous and whatever, but like, that's kind of where issues are bubbling, like might bubble up that I sort of maybe wouldn't see otherwise.
Yeah.
That if I'm not, I'm not on the ground in schools all the time. I have my kids and I hear what they're talking about and they're going through. But I think hearing teachers talk in their own sort of communities is always important. And so I think anywhere on social media where teachers are congregating, I'm always lurking there.
Do you have a favorite? I'm always embarrassed to say it, but I'm a big Reddit fan as well. Do you have a subreddit that you lurk in or that you would recommend?
I mean, just the teacher subreddit. That's the one I tend to go to. And then when I'm doing sort of anytime I'm sort of reporting on a specific school or a specific area or a specific district, I will just go into those Facebook groups and lurk for as long as I can. I am part of so many mom Facebook groups where you can sort of get a side schools come up there usually negative. So I'm not the bias is people are not posting in a Facebook group because they're like, I just love this school. So like I understand that those are sort of the bias point of views. But yeah, just this sort of basic teacher. And then there's a higher ed Reddit. Let me look what it is called for professors. It's just it's higher education. So those are sort of the main ones: teachers and higher education. I look in those, and yeah. But I'm always lurking.
This may be a little too wonky, but I'm curious about your thoughts about what I'm calling non-traditional journalists in education and elsewhere. I've been going on for the last couple of years saying that education journalism in particular, needs to do what was done 20 or 25 years ago when blogging came along and started to eat journalism's lunch. And journalism adopted some of the approaches, took some of the best non-traditional folks on, brought them in the newsroom, etc. Do you see, are you sort of pro the innovation and experimentation? Or are you worried about letting the wolf inside the hen house? What's your view on innovation in journalism?
I'm so pro it, but I also think that they have no incentive to join traditional journalism the way that they did 15 years ago because there's no hiring, right? And so there's more of ability to monetize your own Substack, your own TikTok, your own whatever. I think it's like we have more to learn from them in terms of presentation than they necessarily. I mean, I'm sure many of them would want a steady, well-paid job, but like how many of those are left in journalism, right? So I've found sort of, I try to link to as many things as possible. I am, really try to link out. And then I also will interview people. So I can think of two instances where I saw teachers talking about their experiences on TikTok, and I reached out to them and I talked to them. And so one was, this was, I think 2022 or 2023. It was when schools were back full time, but like hadn't been back full time for that long in some places. And I saw a young teacher talking about how his 7th and 8th graders were reading at like a 3rd or 4th grade level, and that they could not do math because he was a math teacher. And he was saying they were having trouble doing the math because they couldn't comprehend the word problems. So right. Like the reading was a barrier to success in other subjects. So I called him to talk to him about his experiences, and I wouldn't have known that was, what people were seeing on the ground had I not, obviously that would have come out eventually, but like, I'm not in the classroom. I can't be in all 50 states, which all run completely differently. And then this is sort of a like nicer version of that. There's another teacher who, she was actually a counselor, and she worked in a low-income Title I district and was spending a lot of time doing kids' hair because they had such, sort of rough home lives that they would be coming to school with, matted hair, with, just not sort of in shape to learn. And so she spent her free time and money, getting together basically a little salon in her office. And she started getting donations in and, and she would not show any of the kids' faces on TikTok, but like she was showing that she did this. And she was also showing how many other things schools are being asked to do in the year, I think it was probably 2023 then. Right. And so I was sort of vaguely obviously aware that those things are happening, aware that a lot of schools offer wraparound services in a variety of ways, but seeing, a woman actually show, this is the shape the kid's hair is in, this is what I am doing. Like, I love doing it. I'm so happy to do it for these kids, but you are not, those of you who are not inside the school need to know that this is going on. Right. And so I really value, people sharing their experiences, teachers, parents, whoever. Also, I mean, I never ended up doing a story on this, but like a lot of parents talking about what's going on in the school boards. Crazy bananas business going on in different school boards across the country.
Yeah.
So it's like I can't tell you how many school boards I've sort of looked into and then been like, well, this has to have national significance for me to write about it. I never want to sort of like put a small district on blast, unless to me, it's telling a bigger story. I take very, very seriously the responsibility of putting something in the New York Times. But I assume at some point, like all of the sort of different shenanigans going on in school boards will coalesce into some story about, because it's like I get so sort of tired of just like, and here's another culture war story. Like, who cares at this point? Like, not who cares, they really mean a lot, but like in terms of, my writing and where I think I can actually be helpful, just writing yet another story about the culture war, about X is tearing this community apart. Like, I just don't think that that's helpful anymore.
You mentioned that we need to learn from them. Traditional journalists need to learn from non-traditional, and you described a bunch of situations in which you'd found what I'm going to call informal experts and brought them into your stories and linked out. What else do journalists, J school journalists, traditional newsrooms need to learn from folks out there, assuming that your premise is correct, that outside journalists don't need to or want to come in anymore? What else do we need to learn?
I wouldn't say they don't need to. I'm saying like there's no jobs. Yeah. I would love it if there were a bajillion jobs in education journalism. I think it is one of the most undercovered topics, considering how many students are in this country and how different every state is and how different the experiences of rural Americans, of urban Americans. Right. I mean, I actually think it's a tragedy that there is not more traditional education journalism being funded. I think even for the people who would want to and would benefit from joining a traditional, a place of traditional journalism, unfortunately, I think those jobs are not around, which is a minor tragedy.
But what else are the non-traditional folks doing that is admirable, imitatable? If they're not going to come in, what do we need to learn about them? Do we need to all get on camera and do short form videos? What do we need to do?
I mean, I think the people who are good at that should do that. I mean, doing short form video truly makes me want to die. I keep trying to learn how, and I just feel so stiff and weird, and I don't like doing it. But I think that to reach more people, it is really important to do. So I'm personally torn about that. I think also, my time on this mortal coil is limited, and I unfortunately wish that I wanted to spend it making short form video, but at least right now I don't. Right. So I think that you should do that, but like I don't like to give advice that I myself am not taking. Right. So yes, I do think that's important. I think sometimes a willingness to, I don't think that journalists, mainstream journalists should necessarily adopt this, but I do appreciate the willingness to sort of do a story piece by piece. It's much harder to do when you're, someplace with so many eyeballs on you all the time and so many sort of like clear standards of what of what we can do and what we can't do. But just being able to sort of follow a story piecemeal as it develops rather than having to wait until, you've done all your reporting, you've gotten all your ducks in a row, and then you're making the finished product. I think the ability to sort of do it sort of in shorter, quicker pieces and follow a story as it's developing in real time is really great. And certainly, beat reporters can do that a little better than I can, since I'm, covering so many different things and I'm not a beat reporter. But I think that there's an immediacy to what people who are less traditional journalists can do that, we're all we have a lot of standards and get in trouble for tweeting too aggressively. So I think there's a looseness and a freedom that they have that I sometimes envy, but I also understand why I'm not.
That's a great description. There's a vulnerability in saying, hey, here's what I know today.
Yeah.
And I'll probably know more tomorrow. And I think that that's very uncomfortable. And ironically, those of us who grew up or have come to become comfortable sharing our words are uncomfortable or even talking in front of an audience are uncomfortable talking to. I recently tried to do a camera-facing promotion, and I was just struck by how uncomfortable it was compared to talking to an audience or doing a book thing or or writing pieces. I think there are obstacles there. I feel like at least some of us need to turn the corner. And what's the cliche? Find the readers where they are, right? Find your audience, because otherwise we become sort of an ivory tower. Now I'm pontificating. I apologize. I appreciate you coming on the show so much. I appreciate your work so much, and thank you for accepting the honorary education journalist title.
I'm honored.
If anyone has not gone and read your recent piece about the air quotes AI schools in Beaufort, Georgia, they should go find it and read it immediately. Jessica Grose from the New York Times opinion section, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.